like to do is I like to go straight to the source. So yachting. Yachting is yachting is defined as either racing a sailboat, a speed sailboat, or the act of actually yachting. Those are the only two definitions. So you're either racing a boat or you're either leisurely sailing a boat. So which brings me to my next big thing. Use the terminology. Use the terminology. It's become such a common thing because of Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and all these different outlets give you a view into so many different worlds that it becomes common. And the problem with things becoming common is we forget why they were important in the first place. So the whole allure to yachting really wasn't how much does it cost. The allure to yachting is supposed to be how far can you go? Obviously, the bigger the boat, the further you can go. So when you are using the term yachting, keep those things in mind. And you're not driving a boat, you're sailing, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's a sailboat or whether it's a motor yacht or a motorboat, you are in fact sailing. That is the terminology you should be using. I would challenge you to learn more about not necessarily the industry, but learn more about the community and the happening around yachting. If it's something you're interested in, obviously you're still listening to me talk. You really need to do that. You need to do a deeper dive into how this mechanism works. Go to a marina, hang out for the day, go grab some food, or just kind of, go to the front desk, tell them that you're interested in yachting. They'll probably ask you if you have a boat, but that's only because they have a business that makes money off of boats. They're not being pretentious and snooty and stuck up. They are looking for the potential of business. So you can just tell them, I'm thinking about purchasing a boat, right? So, which is true, right? So that gives you cause to be there. So that out of the way, what's going on in the yachting industry? So I'll touch on that just a little bit. So what's happening right now is they have determined that the buyer for yacht class vessels is getting younger. So the age has dropped by about 2 years, I believe, from the average age yachter. The average age a person buys their first yacht has gone from somewhere between 50 and 52 being around about the age demographic down to 48 to about 50. So they expect that number to continue to drop, not every year, but they expect it to continue to drop over the next 5 to 10 years. And what that means is the person that's getting into these boats, getting younger, means number one, there's more money moving around, or it means that the industry and how the consumer consumes is changing. And for right now, both of those things are happening. So you've got all these different ways to make money now that most people have never had access to. It used to be wherever you lived, well, that determined how much money you were going to be able to make unless you were willing to leave. Now you can get on the internet and, make media or anything else and make $1 bajillion, right? So that being said, that's part of what's feeding the demographic changes. And younger people getting into the sport or getting into, I don't know why I did that. Younger people getting into the sport or getting into the happening of it it's going to change how things work, and nobody really knows exactly what that means. So one way that it's already changing things is that the super yacht and the mega yacht community are seeing where more people are interested in getting into a multi-owner partnership. I personally don't believe in this, but I'm that type of guy. I was raised as an only child. What's mine is mine, period. And I don't want to ask permission. I don't want to clear it. I don't want to talk to anybody about what it is that I intend to do with what's mine, period. And the reason I'm so snooty about it when it comes to boats is because when you get to a yacht class vessel, or we'll just leave it there. When you get to a yacht class vessel, it's not just a boat. It's not just, let me borrow your car. Let me borrow your, motorcycle, or the car's mine today, or the motorcycle's mine today. When you have a yacht, you have changed how the world accepts you. You have taken on a thing. You no longer have to go through the same avenues. So if you've got 6 people that own a vessel, then that's 6 people you have to run everything, or 5 people you have to run everything by before you make a move. Whereas if I want to go to the Bahamas this weekend, all I need to do is get a good sleep on Thursday, get up first thing in the morning, run the boat down to Miami, and drop it in the water and make the run to the Bahamas. Obviously, there's some provisioning that needs to happen before that happens, but I don't have to ask anybody's permission. I don't need TSA's permission. I don't need the U.S. government's permission, and I damn sure don't need 5 other people telling me where I can and cannot go with my boat. That's my 2 cents. But that is what in fact is happening right now. You've got the younger buyer does not want to be tied to a thing. They don't want the responsibility that comes along with owning a yacht class vessel. And in many cases, they don't want the responsibility that comes along with just owning just a regular, average, everyday boat. They just don't want it. So the idea is, if they can spread that responsibility around to 5 or 6 other people, then it's more advantageous. And it also expands your buying power. If you can only afford a $20,000 or a $50,000 boat, then you pull in 5 other people that can kind of make the same move. You find yourself in a place where you can have a bigger, better thing, so to speak. But the truth of the matter, in my opinion, is if you're not willing to take on that responsibility, then you're not willing to take on the responsibility of maintaining a business that you can tie to that boat to help pay for it and offset the insurance, or B, you're not willing to do what it takes to learn how to run the vessel. And that is a very large problem in today's waters in the US, especially in Florida. You have people that have never run a boat before getting behind the helm of high-powered vessels, getting behind the helm of, 40, 50,000 ton vessels, or, however you want to say it. It's just a dangerous situation. So if that demographic doesn't want to take the time for the small, important things, then they most certainly aren't going to take the time for these other things that a novice or, someone with a little less experience is going to understand to be important. That's just kind of where we're at. Doesn't change it. It's just my opinion. So those are the 2 ways that the industry is changing. The buyer is getting younger, right? And then how the buyer buys is changing. And the first time that I heard someone mention this was talking to Vincent Fischetti. And you'll hear me reference Vincent a lot because Vincent and I are about the same age. He has decided that he is going to be the change in how the consumer makes their purchase. And he's got some really great concepts. I'm not going to regurgitate any of his content until I've had an opportunity to sit down and let him share it with you. And then we can go through it. I may not explain it appropriately or correctly, so I'm not going to touch it. But he has decided that there is space for growth and change in the industry. And I agree with him 100%. The old school yacht brokers, they don't care. They don't want to hear it. It's, hey, can we make the deal? And I get it. Believe me, I get it. because ideas and concepts don't pay the bills. Closing these deals do. But if you're going to close 2 deals today and no deals for the rest of the season, in comparison to closing deals throughout the entire season, because you have, made a better connection with the consumer, and you've done more for the excuse me, you've done more for the consumer in the sense of provided more value in the experience, that person's going to come back to you. Not only are they going to come back to you, but they're going to bring people to you as well. And we all know that this business, the guys that are smashing it are the guys that have word of mouth, and the guys that are also willing to do the things that it takes to bring up, how do you say, cold sales, I suppose. So those are the breaks, I guess. That's kind of what's going on, or at least that's what we're going to touch for today. Another thing is, brands. So when you're talking about cars, everyone knows the big players. When you're talking about yachts, no one really knows who the big player is, because it's so far from everyday life that it's tough for the average person to know. They know the basic brands because they see them all the time, but they don't know the bigger brands. So it's really interesting to listen to people talk about what they like, what they don't like, why they like it and why they don't like it. And more often than not, it has more to do with the perceived cost of the thing than the actual thing. So it just blows my mind that a person would be more concerned with how much it costs more so than what you can do with it, because the whole idea is, what are you doing? Are you racing? Are you out for a leisurely weekend? Are you cruising? Are you going exploring? What's happening? And you have all these people that, constantly talk about how much they love to travel and how travel is the most important thing to them. And they haven't done anything to change how they travel, how they get where they want to get to. So you can put 20 grand, 30 grand a year into the airline's pockets and the hotel's pockets and all of these other places in between, or you can cut all of the middlemen out and you can control these environments yourself. You can buy yourself a small plane after you've gotten your license. You can buy yourself a small vessel and kind of go anywhere in this hemisphere you want to go. Like, it's just food for thought. Once again, just my opinion. One of the things that I think about often is, how I got to the place where I am now with my thought process on boating and yachting. I absolutely love adventure, period. There's something about, doing something that's not common and going somewhere that's uncommon. It's just something about it that draws me to it. I get bored quickly. I'm pretty smart, so I figure things out fairly quickly. So that doesn't leave a whole lot of corners to deal with that. So, how I like to yacht has a lot to do with how I got started with it. And it all goes back to being a kid watching Miami Vice. I mean, any guy that has a speedboat, I guarantee you, he is a diehard, Miami Vice idea fan. He may not be a fan of the show, but definitely a fan of the idea of it all. And, when you get to those places where you're trying to figure out what kind of boating you're going to do, you're going to have to figure out, what kind of person are you on the water? What kind of boat does a person like me need? How do you go about that? Well, one, you should find somebody who knows what they're doing, what they're talking about, and listen to what they have to say. Then you go back and you figure out what you need to do, and then you go spend some time on the water. There's a ton of people out there that have, $150,000, $250,000 boats, and all they really needed was a little, Boston Whaler, 13-foot, 16-foot boat that they could run around on, once a month, twice a month when it's warm out, because all they really want to do is just get a little bit of wind in their hair, get a little salt on their face, right? So, and then you have people that, they go out and they buy these, little skiffs and all these all these other little interesting looking boats, when what they really want to do is they want to hang out in, the Gulf. I mean, you got Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, all of that stuff's right there on the coast. Florida is such an enormous place, and there's so much to do when you're talking about being outside and being on the water. We have tons of waterways. We have just an immense amount of sandbars on the Gulf side, and we have tons of other things that you can do on the Atlantic side. So you really need to narrow down what kind of boat most, calls to you. So, the way that I chose the boats that I have, the first one, I just wanted a boat. I knew I wanted a boat. I didn't really care what I was going to do on the water, but I knew I needed something big because I know myself. That's your first thing. You got to know who you are. So I know who I am. I know that I'm willing to get in a boat and go most anywhere that the boat can go, and probably some places that it probably shouldn't go. So I knew I needed something hardy. I knew I needed something, sporty, something that I could enjoy and have fun with. The truth of the matter for me is most of the time when I do things, I do them by myself. So it doesn't matter how many pals I see before I do whatever it is I'm doing, or how many pals I see after, I've done everything I wanted to do. The doing and the happening, most of the time, it's just me. So I didn't have to go overboard with what I needed. And I looked for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I do things, and I have always done things in my life on a timed basis, meaning I had things when I was 20 years old that I had the money to do that I didn't want to do them then. I wanted to save those things for when I got older, because I was moving at such a fast pace. I was concerned that the things that I love the most, I would do them so much that I would, I'd get bored with them and they'd be gone. I just didn't want to do that. So boating is one of those things, or yachting is one of those things. Ownership is what I mean. Ownership is one of those things. So around about a week before I turned 30, I started looking. So I was on Craigslist. I was on, Boat Trader. I was on all these different things. I knew I didn't want a brand new boat. And at the time, I don't think I could afford a brand new boat, not the size that I wanted. And I knew that I wanted something that I could use to learn the different aspects of boating, right? Everything from maintenance all the way to, the actual happening. And I looked at a bunch of Sea Rays, and I looked at a bunch of stuff, like just every day on the internet, just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Any guy that likes boats, that's all they do any day anyway. So that's what I did. And then I noticed down the street from the warehouse that I had for my business, I noticed a boat. I'd gone down that road 1,000 times. Never saw it. Never saw it. It had been sitting there for 20 years, I think he said. It'd been there for a really long time. So I went over, long story short, I looked at the boat. It was a wreck. But he explained to me what it was and what the potential for the boat was, and that's all I really needed to hear. So I purchased the boat. The next day I came back and he had washed it up, and man, it looked good. I'll tell the story one day, but now, just trying to get to the point. But it really looked good, and I was really excited about it, and he had cleaned it super well. So I went and grabbed my truck, backed in, pulled the boat out, hopped out, shook his hand, drove it down the street, and backed it into my property, closed the gate, and then stood back and kind of looked at what I'd done. When I looked at the back of the boat, I could see because he had cleaned it, I could see where there were words, like where the boat hailed from. Boats are always going to have a name, or Yacht class vessels and bigger class boats are going to have the name of the boat, and then it's going to have where it hails from. This boat was called, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was from Destin, Florida, right? My middle name's Destin. So the boat literally had my name on it. So it made me happy. And I was roaring to go with it. So it took me a really long time to learn how to rebuild this boat. And in that time period, I fell in love with the whole story of what it was. So the boat is a 1964 Formula 233. And I talk about it all the time because I absolutely love it. It's my thing. It's my thing. It's my jam. But I learned everything you could possibly learn about it. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm still in the process of rebuilding it. It's taken me a really long time to do. But for me, it's not about the end destination. It's about the journey, right? So I would expect that the boat will be in the water, this spring. And then the second boat that I have, I was actually looking at a bigger boat, and it already kind of all but closed the deal on a much, much larger vessel. It's a 46-foot ocean yacht, and it needed a lot. It needed a lot of work, but it did need a lot of work to run. Just needed to put the engines back in. So that's not a big deal. The cosmetics, that's something different. And once again, I knew that, it was important to me to have a deep understanding of what the boat is capable of and what's going on in beneath and all of that jazz. That's just kind of who I am. My mom tells a story about a watch. Timex used to have an ad where they take the watch and they beat the watch and, break the watch, and, they hold it up and the watch still works, and Timex takes a lick and keeps on ticking. And that's kind of what I've done to everything that I've ever owned. I pretty much just, at some point, it's going to get stripped down and I'm going to rebuild it, because that's just who I am. And that's what I've done with both of these vessels. So the second one, instead of getting the 46, I decided to get a little bit smaller. I got a Tierra 3100, which is about 33 foot. With the dive platform and the Pelican Walk, you're talking 36 foot. They have a really great reputation for a very well-built boat. They have a great reputation for giving you more boat than you actually paid for. And they also have a great reputation for being very stylish. And that appealed to me. So I bought that one and excuse me, brought it back, and maybe about 3 or 4 months after I got it here, got it settled where I was going to be working on it at, I was in a really bad motorcycle accident, or I was in a bad motorcycle accident. And then later on, car accident, blah, 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 blah. And here we are. Excuse me. So that's kind of, how I ended up with the vessels that I have. And when I got the boat back and I washed it and I could kind of see the back, it says, I can't really tell, but it looks like it says just in time. So it's not quite destined, but it was close enough for me. So that made me feel good as well. And that's that. Both of those vessels work really well for my game plan. And I expect that they'll both be in the water, sometime this spring. It gives me an opportunity to do all of the things that I want to do on the water and to be self-sustained. Both of them have cabins on them. Both of them have a head in them, head being a bathroom. Both of them have a cooking station. The Formula has a cooking station on the deck, and the Tierra has a cooking station, obviously, in the down below in the cabin. So, and there's plenty of space to lay down. There's plenty of space for a couple of guests, and both of them have ranges well beyond 300 miles. So that's anywhere that I want to go anytime soon. Obviously, you're not going to straight shot it. You know, you're going to need to chart, plot some charts so that you can stop and get some fuel and some provision, keep it moving, check in, make sure that everybody knows how you're doing, make sure everybody knows that you're okay. And Formula as a brand, I mean, it's one of the original American badasses. So they know their stuff. And if you are looking for a boat, new or used, it's a solid platform. You can find them super cheap if you don't mind having an older boat. And again, I would, urge you not to get caught up in the idea of, you need a brand new boat, because you don't. You really don't. So, if that's something you just want, I'd say game plan for it. But if you're waiting until you get there, you're going to wait too long. Because if you really enjoy this and you really love it, it won't matter to you. Once you get out there and you're under your own power, got to believe that it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. So those are kind of all of the things that I really wanted to touch on. And if anybody's got any questions, I'll take any questions that you have. If not, do a quick recap. And recap being, basically what's happening in the industry is you have the buyer is getting younger, and the buyer wants to have, group funding for these boats more often, or at least that's what they're projecting. And then on the other side of that, what is yachting? Yachting is either racing sailboats or motor yachts, or it is the actual act of leisurely yachting. And the brands that I am dealing with right now, personally, are Tierra, which my boat is a Tierra Pursuit. So at one point, Tierra and Pursuit were the same, right? S2 factories were producing these Tierra Pursuits. Then they split, and it was S2 producing Tierras and S2 producing Pursuits. Then they split again, and I believe it's a completely separate company now that stands on its own. So I have the best of both worlds. That's the way that I take it. And so you can say that, today we kind of talked about Formula, and we talked about Pursuit, and we talked about Tierra. So, and how I like to yacht. I'll be doing a more in-depth video on that in the spring. I've got lots of things planned. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. So one of the other things I wanted to share with you is just a little tip. So getting into boating, the smart thing to do is to learn how to do some of this stuff on your own. It'll save you thousands of dollars. And depending on how big of a boat you have, it'll save you tens of thousands of dollars. So one of the things that you can do is you can get your hands on, let you guys see that there. Get your hands on one of these little small manuals, these how-to manuals. And sometimes they're brand specific, but the techniques are universal. So West Marine creates they have their own products. They have, their own corner of the market that they control, period. However, that being said, the repair technique does not belong to them. So any material that you use is basically going to be used the same way. These are free. They are free. You have, what is this thing got? You got 9 chapters of everything, you kind of need to know for some small and minor repairs and some pretty big major repairs. So you've got, understanding fiberglass boat construction, repairing and finishing surfaces and gel coat damage, repairing rotted stringers and floors, assessing the repairing structural damage, repairing delaminated cores and replacing damaged core material, repairing delaminated plywood, soles and decks. Like there's just so much. There's 3 or 4 more chapters left on that. So it's a starting point. And you just have to accept that you don't know what you don't know. And that is part of the adventure. I'm Tony White. Thanks for spending some time with me. I will love, I will lux, I will life. Find some water, get out on it, and happy yachting.